Hi Guy, and welcome to the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and this week we will be taking a deep dive into Shadow of the Beast 1. Now before we do that, of course, we'll have a look at a bit of this week's news. First of all, I've just received a donation from Pimslaw Dutch Nicky. A huge thank you to him. He did just donate via the site, so I'm quite happy to, very happy in fact to mention him. Even better for me especially. We're getting to that time of the year when all the hosting costs are due and it gets very expensive, and we're almost at 12 months now of the ongoing podcast. I'm still surprised that we're managing this week by week. So yeah, a huge thank you to Pimslaw. Next up was a momentous occasion because we've just received another review on iTunes by Choppy. It's great that somebody's actually doing it. I'm up to 11 now. We are going to get there eventually. Next up, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this. I mean, I was there for the Kickstarter launch because it was quite a great thing that was going on. Steve Jones, who used to do like Amiga builds back in the day, like ripping apart original Amiga 500s and repackaging them and upgrading them, I think, to make like Amiga 1500s. Anyway, he's got together with a small team, I believe, and they're making something called the Amiga 3000 inspired Amiga PC. And this is effectively an Amiga style case, so it's the desktop version, not the typical keyboard that we're used to using. And it's a pretty much fit all system, so you can put like A500, 600, 1200s in there. There's also like a tiny slot underneath it where you can slip in a special keyboard, and you could even, if you wanted to, put in things like Gotek drives, Raspberry Pis, even maybe even use it towards a PC build. It will also take like special power packs and things like that, and it's an all-in-one unit. Now they're looking for around £70,000, and at the time of recording it's about halfway there. Now this ends on the 2nd of October, I believe, and it's £150 for the white version of the case, and it goes up in different stages. But it's great to see that someone from back in the day is reintroducing themselves to the Amiga hardware and coming up with all this like new stuff. Just surprised me, completely blew me away. I'm thinking that after this project, assuming it's a success, he might spin off into different things. So hopefully some guys will maybe make some donations or get more involved and start sharing it online and stuff like that, because it really intrigued me. As I said, I did turn up for the online like launch party where they would basically, Steve was on camera with people from like the Retro, our Ravi, can't remember, the Retro Man Cave, he was there as well, and I'm missing somebody else there. Sorry guys, but it was a really good night, about an hour and a half long, and they were just talking through the different things they're expecting to do with it, and it intrigued me. Sadly, I've not got I don't think I've got enough. I've got an Amiga 1200, but I'm not in any push to move away from that because it takes up enough space as it is, and I don't think I'd want to have an all-in-one unit. Anyway, that aside, I was really impressed by it. It's a great looking piece of tech. And lastly, before we get on with the show, I just wanted to mention a particular YouTube channel called 16-Bit Baz. I was having all sorts of problems a while back with actually like building a compact flash hard drive for my Amiga, and it was great to have this video set series to go through. It's in several parts, and I'll post the link into the description. But if you're in two minds about building an Amiga and you're a bit worried about having to put all the hard drive together and stuff, this video channel is really good. It's quite clear, it's step by step. You just follow that for umpteen minutes and it'll set you on your way. Just to interject here, we have an update about last week's episode where I covered Defender of the Crown. Now, much to my surprise, Jim Sachs actually came forward and made comment on the episode and said he'd listened to it, and he made a few corrections about the history section. Now, a lot of the time I'm just relying on what I can find across either articles or interviews or basically what's on like general databases, so it was much of a surprise to be told this, but he basically asked me to pass this on. RJ Mickle was not the game designer, he was the programmer. Kelly Beck was the game designer and did zero coding. The music was written by Jim Kumo, not Bill Williams. I did 90% of the graphics. I just hired all those other artists to do some brainstorming and initial art ideas. None of these people had anything to do with Defender of the Crown 2. That was entirely a one-man production. I did all the design, art, programming and music. I've spoken to Dan from Lemon Amiga and he's going to go and update all the data over there related to this because nobody really had any sort of clue. A lot of the time we're just relying on what it says in game credits or again what's been posted before. A lot of this stuff can't really be checked, so I think it's pretty much confirmed if it's come from the man himself. I'm quite happy if anybody else comes to any of these episodes in future and you're involved in the game and I've done something wrong, then by all means drop me a line and I will post an update. Anyway, let's carry on with the show. There aren't as many games or game series in the Amiga library that elicit as many fond memories or moans and groans about how great it could have been or how much a series improved generally over time as the Shadow of the Beast games. Now, I'm sad to say that this isn't really something I ever played when I was growing up. I was aware of it because, again, it had a lot of talk about in magazines and stuff. It really was something different compared to the other titles at the time, but I never got a chance to actually play it properly. And I think the closest I ever came to it was seeing the first one displayed in like a local retro game. Well, it would have been a video game shop at the time. They're called the Retro Gaming Shop now, but they weren't then, were they? It was always something that drew my attention when I did see it in action, and I always had that fond memory at the back of my mind thinking this is a real a push for the Amiga. You know, it really does show off what it's capable of and what it can do. So coming back to this today and wanting to tackle it for the show, I was a bit hesitant obviously at first because I'm sure this has got a lot of fond memories behind it and people take different views and stuff. I've got to do this, it's all part of what we do here, so let's get on with it. Now, it was published by Psygnosis, who also did games like Agony, Bill's Tomato Game, which we did in episode 29, Hired Guns, Lemmings, Pugsy, etc, etc. They were huge, they were like ocean sort of size, you know, they really did have the fingers in so many different pies, and I could be here all day reading out these games. It was developed by Reflections. Now they were behind Awesome, that's also spelled in capital letters, Ballistics, and I'm not sure, I think that's like an Arkanoid type clone, I don't know, Brian the Lion, all three Shadow of the Beast games, and they were also Newcastle based. I don't know why that stood out to me. Again, they're behind some of the more well-known games and some of the bigger ones, and they were UK based. It's just nice to know. It came out in 1989 and was on 2 floppy disks. It was only for 1 player and was priced at £34.95, which was a first for Amiga games at this time because none of them had ever been at this price before. It was coded by Martin Edmondson, who had been responsible for games like Armageddon 2, Awesome, Ballistics, and he also did Shadow of the Beasts 2 and 3. Also Paul Howarth, Ballistics and Shadow of the Beast 3. The music was by David Whittaker. He was behind games like BMX Simulator, Chips Challenge, Epic. That's a very huge ocean game. Golden Axe, I think that's very popular with the music. It's quite referred to very often these days. Lemmings 2, etc, etc. He was right across the Amiga library and did so many different games. Now, Shadow of the Beast didn't really start out as a game per se. Martin Edmondson sat down and created a technical sketch laying out the points and speeds at which different parallax layers should scroll and where the 2 play fields should swap to produce a deep parallax effect, which means next to nothing to me, but I think in terms of graphical jiggery pokery, that's quite impressive. It certainly wasn't something the Amiga was really possible at doing at the time. I don't think the demo scene was big enough to be doing these sort of things, or it certainly hadn't come up to the stage where it could be matching this sort of thing, especially in like commercial releases. Now the whole game was based around this system. You know, it was pushing this demo type tech to make a full release, and it was made within just 9 months of development time, which is quite surprising considering it was such a huge game. This is like an ongoing scrolling world that you can explore and go to different parts of, and it does have loading interjected in between them parts, but it's not like there's a standard level structure and you're trying to like get to the end of level 1 and it starts level 2. You know, you can actually explore and go to different bits and bobs. Now, Martin was aiming to get this to as close as 60 frames per second as possible. The best they could manage running at such a high speed was 50. It certainly shows when you load the game. David Whittaker was actually asked to resample every instrument just for Shadow of the Beast. You know, usually these are like standard samples from a normal library that everyone used from certain programs. For this, he actually recorded 12 tracks with proper original type instruments. So this sort of like explains why it's got that great audio feel and different to what people could hear at the time. I mean, the game was based around side-scrolling sort of like action arcade games. I mean, that's what Martin Edmondson wanted to do originally, and it's why the game itself is sort of like a 2D scrolling, not beat 'em up, but if you think of games on like say the Neo Geo, Magician Lord, that sort of thing, you know, the nice big chunky graphics and large characters going up and down ladders and moving from section to section. He enjoyed that within the arcades, and this was an attempt to bring that arcade feel home to the Amiga. The art style was inspired by the fantasy work of Roger Dean and Rodney Matthews. It was originally called Beast, but due to licensing name issues, they had to add the Shadow of the. Now this happened quite late in the development, and they'd already done things like the title screen, effectively the original intro screen. When you load the game up, it just shows Beast and like a picture of the monster like putting a fist in, and it's the top of his head towards the screen. Now it was too late to change all that, but luckily they hadn't done anything else, so the only time in the entire game where that appears, the original name on its own, is on that loading screen, and they decided to leave it in. Now the price of this at £35 was jaw-dropping even back then, you know. Games around then, brand new ones, were coming out around £20 to £25. Anything below that was sort of like your budget range, and they realised this as they were pricing it open, they thought, oh god, we're going to have a bit of a struggle. So they came up with the bright idea of putting a huge fancy box with gorgeous like artwork designs on the front, a copy like a print of the original box artwork inside, and a t-shirt with the design on as well to sort of bump out that price. It's probably because t-shirts and things like that cost next to nothing, especially if you're doing say like 100,000 copies or something, and it would explain why they could get away with charging so much. This is something other games in this series also did as well. The box artwork was done by Roger Dean, and also it was one of the biggest game boxes that had ever been released for the time. This was certainly not something that other companies were doing. Now, the game itself, this is boasted within the manual, has over 350 screens, used around 2.2 megabytes of graphic data, and used 3 megabytes in total across just the 2 discs. This was certainly unheard of at the time. Most games, they didn't go to this length, they didn't have this sort of artwork or anything included. Now, it was ported to the Amstrad CPC, Atari Lynx, that's a very good version I must say, Atari ST, Commodore 64, Super Nintendo, PC Engine, Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive Genesis, and also probably the weirdest one is the Speccy or the ZX Spectrum. The SNES version, I said it was ported to there, but weirdly it never actually got released. It was pretty much finished. They got it right up to the final stages. The biggest difference with it was they tweaked the gameplay a bit, made it look more SNES-like with the graphics and a bit easier, and then they added Super to the title. Now, of course, because it was cancelled, it never got a release and nobody got to play it, but several years ago, a ROM for this leaked online, and you can actually go back to it and play it all the way through. I mean, it's fully playable. It's a very good port of the game. I'm sure if this one would have been released, it would have done incredibly well off the back of the market. Shadow of the Beast is well known for having a very dark and morbid sort of story, and it doesn't really get any cheerier from the first game, so let's just do a bit of the introduction from the manual. Whilst very young, Aarbron was kidnapped and enslaved by the priests of the Beast Lord. He grew up on drugs made to destroy his own will and turn him into the Beast Messenger, a powerful creature serving Maletoth, the Beast Lord himself. He did his job until one day he noticed a man about to be sacrificed in a ritual, his face triggering ancient memories. As a sacrificial knife descended into the man's body, Aarbron recognises his father's face. As his father dies in the altar, memories of his childhood and tormented past at the hands of the Beast Lord emerged, and as feelings of hate over his captors took over him, he swore revenge and fled the temple, knowing the road to avenge his father and redemption would be hard. So straight away when you get into that, that's not your usual cheery game story, is it? No, it's a hard quest for revenge and taking on some evil lord. Typical fantasy, I suppose, but I do like that it's got a much darker twist to it, especially the fact that he's trying to avenge his father. When you first start the game, you're presented with a nice, gorgeous bit of artwork to show like this forest with monsters inside. It's all very brown with some red eyes thrown in there. It looks pretty good, and there's a load of scrolling text beneath that which sort of set the scenes and puts into the fact that you're in the forest at the moment in middle of escaping from this Beast Lord. After this, you are pretty much thrown straight into the game world. It's very different and peculiar how to describe this. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it, but you see Aarbron in the middle. He's quite a huge beast. Now, I wouldn't say something like Altered Beast main character design, but he does have a fair old size to him. Now, the way the whole level and the world moves, it's on different layers, and what I mean by that is there's the background layer which moves as you move, the middle layer which you are stood on, the beast, and then there's like a foreground layer, and you can see things like stones and fields and gate and posts, just like typical things that you'd see around a farm and stuff. As you move in the middle on the main part of the road or whatever ground you're on. That middle bit moves at a certain speed, and then the foreground moves as well, and then the background moves at a different speed, as if you're running along from place to place. And I will say straight away, when I first saw that, I was just taken aback, because I'd never really seen this. It's like multiple layered, is it parallax scroll, and the thing they were going on around when they did the tech demo part of it, it was very, very impressive straight away. It's the first thing that catches your eye, and I think that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to grab your attention and scream, just look at this is such like amazing quality. Now all of this is like covered in this gorgeous, like luscious background and front and foreground art. I don't know what to say there, but the beast is very well drawn. All the surroundings look it almost like a piece of art. It moves like perfectly well. It's just like dripping and oozing that sort of quality. Now there's very little on the screen that you can actually see. In the top left corner you've got like a little heart rate meter. It's like a little square box with the heart jumping up and down. You get 12 hit points, but I think they're called strength points in the manual. You can of course pick up refills for that. You can also pick up a few items such as keys, which are always displayed in the top right corner. Now this isn't your typical actiony arcade sort of game. It doesn't just plonk you in a level and then you're off and going from left to right or right to left. You are allowed to explore, and it pretty much dumps you there. You can go in whatever direction you want, left or right, and if you go right immediately, there is a well with a huge like in arrow above it, which you can jump into and climb down. Now I will say, a bit of a side note here, this well was a nightmare, because when I first started playing the game, I hit that first, wandered down to the bottom, which takes absolutely ages because it's quite slow climbing down there, and there was a locked door at the bottom, and I only know this because later on as I was playing, I was able to find a key which would open this. But the problem is, when you get to the bottom of the ladder, it doesn't let you get off the ladder. It doesn't give you any sort of animation to say, oh yeah, you need to go back up, or you know, the door's locked. It just stops there, and I actually got a bit stuck and thought, well, maybe the game's crashed, and I actually reloaded it at one point thinking, oh, maybe I should try a different version just to make sure I can get past. No, it wasn't. You literally, if you've got a key later, that door's open when you come down, but it doesn't really indicate that to you. But again, you don't have to go in that well at all. You can run past that, and there's a castle off to the far right across like a vast field, or if you turn around and go left right from the beginning, you'll end up in a forest and some trees, and you can go down underground and explore like this labyrinth level beneath all the forest with like massive roots and trees and things. It gives you an awful lot of stuff to explore. You know, it isn't linear. It doesn't force you down a set path every time. Again, I went all the way off to the right to the castle. Now I got stuck a bit because you need like a torch to light the way because it's dark inside, but if you want to, you can fumble your way through, because there are the odd bits where it lights up a bit as it responds to things, but you're better off like picking up the item objects as you're exploring the world. I am of course getting a bit too far ahead of myself there. The controls for this are pretty basic and quite simple. It's up for jump, and you can run left and right or duck. Fire when jumping through the air does a kick, nice and simple. Banging normal fire just does a punch. You know, it's a very arcade-like controls. You know, they do the job well enough. It doesn't feel like the characters misweighted or mismanaged, you know, that there's too much gravity or anything. It's just perfectly capable for doing what it does with the controls. I was fine with them. Maybe some people won't like them, but they seem to do the job well. Now, as I said earlier, this is a huge world that you get to explore, so you've got tons of environments thrown in there to go around. You can see things like caves, woods, like the castle sort of area, the tree roots I mentioned, which are all underground. That's almost like a labyrinth. You've got fields above outside that cover these huge distances that you have to go dashing across, and it all looks absolutely amazing. It's all incredibly well drawn. It's almost like an art style in itself. It's very monstery and gothic. That's terrible, isn't it? I don't really know how to describe that, but it's very in your face sort of monstery. It's sort of crazy fantasy realm that I don't really see much of, and I certainly hadn't seen much of this back in the day. Later on in the game, there's even a rocket pack, I don't know what else to call it, which pretty much lets the main character float around and start shooting things. You can use that shooting gun in later sections as well as you're dashing around. It does make a nice change to it. It doesn't really change with the controls. It's quite responsive. It moves well enough up and down, left and round the screen. And at the same time, everything in the levels themselves are much bigger than the Beast. Even though he's quite fairly well sized on the screen, you've got things like hands and horns and dragons and things flying around. These huge monsters. These proper, quite scary designs in some cases. With a weapon and the way the gun works, it's quite well done. You know, you don't sit there and think, oh, this is a poor shooter bit that they've just stick in. It feels very natural and well suited to the game, and it leads you down that path. In a way, it reminds me of Myth, History in the Making, and that whole section towards the end of the game where you're flying about, but this is mixed in a bit more. You get the flying mixed in with a level beforehand and after. It's not like the end of the game and then it's something different. I didn't really like that in Myth. I think they should have stuck more to the platformers, I think, but with this it doesn't work too badly, and it makes you feel like you've found this item and you're just using it throughout the standard levels. And it does take advantage to them, because there's like a shooting level almost with a really long underground like corridor with lots of aliens beasts flying around you, but it feels part of the game and a natural progression. And the fact that you land after a bit and then you're running around with this little, I don't know, shotgun super technology, it fires balls, whatever it is, but it works well. One thing I have to say about this game is it is absolutely oozing quality with the music. It is littered with music tracks throughout, and they're all responding to what's going on in an area. It's not just set like the same thing all the time, and as you descend into different buildings, explore different things, there's all these different tunes playing off, and even going off to look at them separately, which I did mention earlier, because there's 12 of them like mixed across the games. Now these are proper tracks, they're not like 20-30 seconds long and then loop constantly. If you go and look at them, some of these are like 3, 4, 5 minutes even long, and they really are incredible, and they have lots of changes going on with them, and they really sound like proper musical tracks. There's no singing or voices mixed in there, it's all like instrumental, but it just adds so much to this game. Working with these awesome graphics and everything that's going on around it, you just sit there and in awe. You really need to play this either with headphones on or with your speakers blasting this music out. If you get a chance to play this on its own, not really with mute or whatever, do not bother. You need to appreciate this with the music. Now I could probably do a full episode on the graphics alone. I really just can't get over how gorgeous they are and how much detail there is mixed in there. It really is a sight to behold. You get to see all these different sections, and they're all over the top and huge designs and really well thought out. And I said it's like an art style. It's rich and it's varied. It's not pixelated or anything like this. It's probably the closest the Amiga could do to, well, what's the right word for it? Almost like that Tutankhamun artwork that the Amiga's famous for, front of deluxe paint. It's that sort of a style. It's up close. It really does push the limit graphically of what the Amiga can do. Each section of the game really does look like it belongs in like a gallery, an art gallery. Maybe they do that for computer graphics, but it certainly would be worthwhile. Now, not many amazing sound effects really for the game, but they are perfectly functionable. Things like when you're attacking enemies, it's very satisfying when you punch or kick them. I don't know what that noise is supposed to be. It's probably a pan being slapped across somebody's head or something crazy, but it's nice and loud, and there's enough of it going on in the background to draw you away from just like it being. A lot of games are very quiet and they don't do much with the audio. This is really in your face and it's full on, and there's not an amazing range of sound effects, but there's enough in there that doesn't draw you away from like the main focus, which are the game tracks. There are also a lot of mini bosses dotted throughout the game. It seems like pretty much every beast imaginable is thrown in there, whether it's like dragon claws or huge hands or big top-off spikes coming out above and below you. I mean, at one point you even get to fight the Psygnosis owl logo. It's only like a little round ball with the owl in the middle. It looks very peculiar, but the fact is it's in there. They really did go overboard, and I think when I had a look in the manual, they said there's like 120 enemies mixed in there. You know, crazy numbers. They really have gone overboard with like the artwork and the design for this whole game. Now, enough gushing about the artwork and the music. Again, it's mind-blowingly beautiful. I really haven't seen anything to this degree, the high level of art quality going on. Just stop, move away, push that off to one side, because we do have to look at the main problems of the game. In particular, you only get one life. Now that is really annoying, because every time you die there's an animation for it and it kicks you back out to the main menu. There's no continues. You could be right on the last part of the game, you die, you're thrown all the way back to the beginning and you have to start your journey again. It's very frustrating and very annoying. It's not like there's some sort of invincibility option or continues that you can collect or even increase your lives as you're going, so it is a bit frustrating there straight away. For the world that's on offer, with the whole look of it and the way the game is styled, it's a very arcadey exploration type of game. It's like, it's almost like a typical arcade platformer, but it feels incredibly simple. What the rest of the game is offering, it should have more to do. There should be a lot more going on around it. It does feel in great part like a demo. Now, that arcade gameplay just doesn't match up to the music or the graphics that you're being shown, or all the different sort of places, and they could have easily expanded that out, I think, and with the design to do something a lot more involving with it, and maybe using more items or having different puzzles mixed in there. I don't know, it just feels off for what you have to actually do in this incredible world. Now, it is incredibly difficult, you will get hit a hell of a lot, and a lot of it feels very random. There are sections where you're running from, say, left to right, and you'll have these enemies coming up from the ground in a curve. You don't see the enemy coming up from beyond the ground, so it can be a surprise, which happens quite often, and you'll just get instantly hit. And there is a brief vulnerability, at least. It doesn't just hit and you're dead, and you do get 12 of them, but it can be very painful to get through sections, because it can be arcing out a load of eyeballs which you really struggle to dodge, and you can stand there and hit them repeatedly, but they keep coming and you have to move very slowly and take your time. Add in the fact that you need to restart the entire game, or if you get hit too many times, you're out, you're done. It's very annoying. Add to this, yes, there's more. You cannot skip the opening. When you first start the game with the scrolling bits and the text, it's very slow to get past. It just adds onto that bit at the beginning, and you just think, this is a bit unnecessary, it should be a lot quicker than this. It also does the same bit with the ending. It's just a nice bit of artwork and a bit of music and stuff, which is great, but when you're seeing it repeatedly and you just want to jump straight back into the game, it's one of them, after 2 or 3 times you'll be a bit miffed by it, because you just want to move on and get back to playing the game. One of the most annoying things about it is the amount of enemies on the screen. It can be manic at times. It can be really filled with them, and you're having loads and loads of stuff thrown at you. You can respond to them fair enough with the controls, but a lot of the time your main character is a bit slow. When you're jumping through the air and stuff, you can't, it's not like, say, in Mario where you've got some control over his momentum and you can spin back in a different direction. It takes half a second to respond either way, and you'll be in a lot of situations where you need to be spinning around quickly on the spot to be dealing with all these different types of enemies, especially when you're just trying to punch them, and the reach on the punch isn't too great. It's not like a huge distance out in front of you. It's not like he's wearing some a Strider type gloves with a little flash coming out. You really have to get them up close and comfortable, and if they're flying or coming in too quickly, you've no chance half the time, because you're having to deal with lots and lots of enemies on the screens, and it just becomes a very frustrating experience. And it's annoying that they didn't solve this for the final release, because they must have played this, demoed it, and just thought, we could do something about that, we could fix that easily, and they just didn't do it. And it's just an annoyance on all these great things this game is offering, and then the core part of the gameplay where it should be right, it should be going great, it just isn't there. It just doesn't happen. Let's take a look at the magazine scores. These are very mixed, I will say. Zap gave it 70%, CU Amiga 84%, Amiga Format 78%, wow, yeah. Amiga Action 86%, not bad. Amiga Power, but this was a re-released edition, gave it 53%. The One on budget re-release 3 out of 5, and CVG 83%. Keep in mind the budget re-releases didn't have any of the art print or the fancy t-shirt or stuff, so they were just going for the main core game. The extras, I think, were supposed to push you more to think this is a real special package, but with them removed, you're literally just left with what you're holding in your hands. Now, everyone in the magazines were blown away by the looks and the sound, pretty much just as I've been, but the gameplay, all of them say it just isn't up to standard. Even the mags that were giving it much higher scores were saying it really has its problems. It looks great, it's fantastic, it's perfect demo photo-ware for putting out there, but it should have a lot more going on with it. The vistas, the music, you know, they're simply beautiful, it's gorgeous. You need a better game to go with it. There's so much going on there, it's got so many ideas thrown in, and then the gameplay it's just missing. Now I know the music was sampled from a Korg M1 keyboard. That really does show. I mean, the whole thing, it's like is a demo for how powerful the Amiga is. I can see why people were so proud of it or wanted to own this to show it off to other people. Maybe like take it in shops or to their friends or demos at parties. Did that ever happen? I don't know. This is like the ultimate demo game for that. You usually could get like them demos off the demo scenes and stuff, and they were fine, but they weren't really playable or interactive or involving, and this was, and it certainly has that look and it sounds great. It's missing a bit, and you could argue you can pretty much do this with demos anyway, especially as much expansive and bigger and better ones came out for the system later up. But the great thing about this is when I first fired it up, I really was gobsmacked. I just sat there and I'm just like, my god, this is epic. This is fantastical. I've never seen anything like this on the Amiga so far, especially to do with a game. And just running around in the simple bits at first, I was really blown away by how great it all looked, and again, the sound. But the gameplay, it's just, there's nothing there. I had this awesome opening of, wow, this is magnificent, and what am I going to be playing? And then you sit down and play it, and I just felt let down. I suspect you will be as well, and pretty much everyone who bought it back in the day, it would have just been exactly the same. All you seem to do throughout the entire game is hop, skip, jump and punch with the odd bit of kicking thrown in. I mean, it's worth checking out for the amazing sound and the visuals. That is an experience in itself. You're only going to be caught up in that for so long while you sit down and focus on the game, and there just isn't enough of a game there to be doing anything beyond running this as a demo for other people to see. This is truly, it's an Amiga powerhouse of a game. There's nothing like this on the Amiga. Even the latest sequels were not up to this degree or had these sort of visuals. It's no surprise that it had so many sequels, not to mention I think like some modern re-release ones later on. I think there was one on the PS4, or was it the PS3, which I don't believe was very good. The original is probably the best for the looks on that front, but they really didn't do themselves any favours. And with that, it's as good a time as any to finish the show. I'm sure there's a few people sat there thinking, what has he just said? This game is awesome. But this is just my opinion. By all means, go and try it out, see what you think. And if you enjoy it or you disagree with me, maybe you found that gameplay good or great, I really would be interested in seeing your side of that conversation. You can drop me a line at Lorfarius@AMIGArama.com or come along to the Facebook page on facebook.com/AMIGArama. Yes, I'm there. Or at AMIGAramaPod on Twitter. It's AMIGArama everywhere on the internet. Now, as always, I would like to send out a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who are over on patreon.com/AMIGArama. I hope you've been there because there are bits and bobs always floating around. But a huge thank you to Adam Bradley, Viggy/CTZ, Graham Vebke, Jason Warnes, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage, Retro Ravi, Sneff and Treble. I do love the fact that Treble's name just sounds so great when I read it out. Don't ever leave, Treble. I don't know what I'll do at the end of the Patreon list. Anyway, until next time, guys.